Anil, welcome to SpeakEasy with Dheeraj Sinha. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Dheeraj. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
I want to start right up with we've spent a lot of time in marketing. You've spent more than 2 decades in marketing, right? And the biggest thing about any faculty, any area is what's changed and what's not, right? Especially with respect to marketing and FMCG. And there's so much happening, right? I mean, the audience completely has changed, mediums have changed, there's D2C brands happening, and so on and so forth. So, top of your mind, right? You have to say what are the few things which have changed fundamentally, if at all, and what has not changed completely.
I mean, this is, I'm sure, because in your forum before have said this, and it might sound like a cliche. Lots has changed and lot hasn't as well, right? So I think at a fundamental level, obviously, the communication channels have changed, and the way brands interact, engage, communicate with consumers have changed. But at a fundamental level, the way we build brands haven't changed. The principles of brand building haven't changed. And the way consumers accept brands into their lives haven't changed. So the way relationships are built haven't changed. However, the mediums have changed. So I mean that's possibly the way to look at it. Today there is a explosion of the ways and means in which consumers engage with brands, interact with brands, consume content, and hence where we need to go to reach out to consumers have changed. But if you look back at what makes brands successful, which are those brands that consumers swear by, and you just look at how those brands got there, I wonder whether the principles have changed at all. I think great brands are built
Yeah,
around strong
yeah,
propositions, very very distinctive offerings, playing a role in consumers' lives. Building a relationship in a
yeah,
meaningful way, telling compelling stories. So all of those principles haven't changed,
yeah.
Dheeraj. I'm sure you agree.
Yeah, of course, of course. But I want to probe a little bit more, right? And the thing which I always debate in my mind is the role of attention, right? And classically, I grew up being a planner, right? And I think a lot of what we checked in a classical brand model was more for correctness, right? So you wrote concepts, you did numerous amounts of consumer work, cycling, recycling, and so on and so forth. A lot of our time, effort on in classical FMCG thinking actually went on correctness, right? I mean, are we appealing to the right motivation? Are we around the right brand codes? Are we violating something? Are we not violating something? What credibility do we have to say this, and so on and so forth, right? And suddenly comes this school of marketing, especially with heavily funded new age companies, right, coming from nowhere, boom. I mean, credit is one example that's often been debated, right? Nobody knows what the product really is, but there is awareness, and we don't know what's working, not working at the back end. But sure, set a cat amongst the pigeons that is there a is there a pillar to marketing which should purely be about optimizing for attention? Do we do that enough? Would you be okay to sacrifice something which is more core for the sake of attention, hypothetically? And that's a debate which I think is going on in many marketers'
Yeah,
minds.
and I think let's unpeel that a little bit. Let's start with the consumer.
Yeah,
What's happening in the end of the consumer,
yeah,
Dheeraj, as we were discussing in the previous point, is obviously there's a profusion of content. There is much more content today that a consumer is consuming than when we were, way back as youngsters. I mean, just imagine a Gen Z today, and when we were back
yeah,
in the teens. So just the amount of content, the kind of content, and if you were to think about media and classical media as they used to exist, and imagine consumers consuming media,
yeah,
right? You just see that
yeah,
there's a dramatic explosion. What happens when there is profusion? Your ability to stand out goes down, right? So at a fundamental level, that's what has changed from a consumer standpoint. Consumer is consuming tons of stuff, seeing lots more. This whole notion of being more aware, being more exposed, what does that mean? Greater exposure means your ability to stand out goes down. So at a fundamental level, today for a brand to stand out has become much more difficult. Yeah. And hence
yeah,
brands have to try way more harder to be seen. Right. So I think that's at a fundamental
yeah,
level what's changed. You may even call it market maturity. You may argue that 30 years back,
right,
the market in the US or in a developed market had already reached that stage. and India is
Yeah.
getting to that level of market maturity. So I mean, I wouldn't say that fundamentally anything has changed as the market is maturing and there's much more content. The need to be seen. I mean, if a brand has to be seen, I mean, the starting point is they need to be seen. So the ability to be seen has
Yeah.
gotten much more difficult. That's the whole thing that
Yeah.
is being translated into this whole need for attention. However,
Yeah.
having said that, it is just not enough that I have the consumer's attention. The immediate next step is what am I?
Yeah.
So what's the attention about?
Yeah.
So you can be a Kentaro purifier. That's attention as well, right?
Yeah.
So the question is,
Yeah.
yes, I've done that once, I've done that twice, and you need to move on, right? So I think what all brands will soon realize, and as we are discussing in this conversation, Credit themselves will realize is what after.
Yeah.
And since in
Yeah.
FMCG, you and me have been in the business of building brands, and it's not about a year or two, but you're talking about decades. Right. We know that longevity
Yeah.
goes beyond attention. In as much as there is desire for attention, there is a much faster decay, right? So that's the second point. We've been in the business
Yeah.
of building brands. We've talked about strategy and media strategies, and to say how long does a piece of communication last, how long does a proposition last, how soon does decay
Yeah.
set in. And what we're realizing is again decay
Yeah.
is setting in faster in situations where you're focused only on attention. And that's where propositions,
Yeah.
distinctive assets, all those other elements start coming
Yeah.
in. So I would say that yes, indeed, there is a much greater need to stay focused on uh, getting the consumer's eyeballs onto your brand, and it's going to be much more tougher today. And hence, when I look at it from my business, when I guide my marketing teams, I tell them to look. In the past, maybe we could have built a brand in a year. Now it's going to take us 5 years. That's the amount of investment we
Yeah.
need to put in. That's how long we need to stay the course. That's how much more difficult it's going to be for us to identify what's that point of distinction that I can tell for 5 years. It's no longer about 6 months
Yeah.
or a year.
Yeah. So I mean, you wouldn't recommend reducing the payload just so that the rocket can go faster. You wouldn't say that err on the side of attention to hell with what the messaging is. I mean, that wouldn't take
That
us
wouldn't
far,
take us
right? That's
far.
that's where we are at.
That wouldn't take us far at all. I think it's also about models, right? And I'm sure someone somewhere has built a model to say rapid awareness increase, leading to rapid
Yeah.
trial generation, rapid subscription over a period of time. What's the retention rate? And maybe there is a
Yeah.
there is a model sitting out there to say that if I have a pool of money and I get rapid awareness and rapid subscription, am I able to get to a certain retention rate which is faster than slow build? But I would argue that
Yeah.
we can't talk retention through one round of iteration or a two-round iteration. If you're talking about longevity, I would just say that longevity will
Yeah.
come only from sustained usage, which comes down to a strong
Yeah.
distinctive proposition. Now, on the contrary, Dheeraj, you also know that when you have a strong distinctive proposition, you possibly don't need that kind of a payload.
Yeah.
So I think there's
That's
a
right.
degree of
Yeah.
laziness to think about payload as
Yeah.
something that can be a shorthand for just building a distinctive brand. It's not. So I think that's the
Yeah.
other bit
Yeah.
which is frustrating us
Yeah,
as
that's interesting. Yeah.
people in the industry, right? When you see lots of mediocrity being
Yeah.
coming in just in the desire for getting attention, getting a celebrity, getting a known
Yeah. And
face,
the
and the
power of
power of
money.
money.
Yeah.
Right? It's just creating
Yeah. Yeah.
people are settling for less.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. I think some of that is very lazy. It's not hardworking enough. It's not pushing the resources to their last bits. On the back of that, Anil, I want to discuss a bit of what's happening with the D2C space, right? Obviously, it's opened a whole new channel, right? I mean, there are examples of brands scaling up in 4 years, 5 years time, right? Clearly denting marketers and businesses mind space, right? I mean, you have examples of Mamaearth, you have examples of a lot of investment coming, and not just in FMCG, but also say boat, or I mean, and there are clients and so on and so forth, right? So, I mean, one is brands have been scaled up in 2 years, 3 years time, right? Through brute force of resources. That's one. But beyond that, right? For example, there was a time when we said power brands, right? Let's focus on 4 brands, 5 brands, 6 brands, right? My friends in the D2C business tell me that the more SKUs I launch, the more energy I generate, and the more offtake it happens, right? A part of this also is because all that's getting measured is acquisition, right? What's not getting measured is retention and repeat, etc., right? All that's getting measured is acquisition. But do you feel the D2C model is forcing us to rethink our traditional model at all, or are there any learnings from there in any ways that we
Yeah,
should take on
very
board?
interesting question and many, many layers to this. So your last question is very specific. So let me answer that the last question first and then kind of broaden up my observation in this space. On
Yeah.
DTC, what we have observed, which is very interesting, is they don't look at a funnel, they look at a pipe. Right, so the point around
Yes.
acquisition that you make, I think for them it's about survival. So they look at a pipe. They're looking at identifying a few 100,000 million consumers who are going to quickly come onto board and buy their product or buy into their offering, and hence they're not
Yeah.
so focused at the top of the funnel, which is where we talk a little bit about brand building. So classic FMCG
Yeah.
approach would be funnel. I'll focus on what my proposition is. I focus on building awareness, right? So I think that's the
Yeah.
interesting notion, and it's interesting because of the nature of consumer journeys and the fact that there's a great degree of disruption that's happening. It's getting very, very non-linear in the way the consumer
Yeah.
journeys are panning out in the context of a digital engagement universe where from awareness to purchase could happen overnight, a purchase could happen, and then awareness could happen because of the nature of e-com, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
classical marketer, if you discard this notion that consumer journeys are complex, then you're stuck in your old models. So, what we are forcing ourselves to think is we have to
Yeah.
think full funnel, and it's a big change. What happens
Yeah.
when you think
Full funnel and it's not
it's full
linear.
funnel and it's not linear? Fundamentally, when you think full funnel, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like why we do market mix modeling. Right? We do market mix modeling because we
Yeah.
believe that every rupee that I put in doesn't matter whether it's equity, whether it's a promotion, whether it's an activation. I will measure ourselves against business, how much business I move. That's the core reason why we do market mix modeling. Right? So the
Yeah.
same principle here to say the moment you start thinking full funnel, you're saying it's not good enough that I have an engaging asset where the consumer sees and loves and clicks and views it. But is he going to take action? And how do I fill that journey? What else do I need to do? So I think that's the first notion, which is very important. I think that's a new discipline that's coming in, leading into us classical marketers having to start thinking about performance, started thinking about uh, conversion, started thinking about loyalty. Those elements, which are kind of fundamentals of somebody like an auto or an insurance or a banker, but it's not so core for a chocolate. You might say, "Arey, how am I going to?" It's fundamentally impulse. So why do I even have to think about the bottom of the funnel?
Yeah.
But I think DTC is forcing us to think that way. The beauty of it is then the moment you start acknowledging, then you say, okay, how do I measure? Then you say, how do I influence? Then I say, who do I partner with? So it starts
Yeah.
opening up a lot of questions. Right? So that's what I like. And that's opened up a huge element of body of work for us. Now we know that the kind of partners we have in the ecosystem, if they're not going to share with us data, then I don't know. I'm thinking full funnel, but I don't have measurement. So then that goes back to big
Yeah.
brands like us to say, what does that mean? That means that I need to build one-on-one relationships. So D2C for me is one-on-one
Yeah.
relationship. Again, you might argue that are there
Yeah.
unit economics there?
Yeah.
Anil? You're a large brand, you're going to be in millions of stores and hundreds of
Yeah.
millions of consumers. How long are you going to go that journey? And that's where the beauty of
Yeah.
digital AI, machine learning, and all starts coming in to say, I need to create my
Yeah.
data. I need to figure out who are those people who are transacting with me, communicating with me. Then what I do with that data, how do I create lookalike audiences? How do I get my communication get smarter? How do I personalize
Yeah.
messaging? All those things come up. So I think what I've noted learning from
Yeah.
D2C brands is this part: greater reliance on one-on-one relationships, greater reliance on measuring the entire consumer journey, and then starting to get our marketers to focus on conversion. It's just opening up, and again, kind of a cliched term here, but also bringing up the science part of marketing a little bit more, rather than just relying on
Yeah.
heuristics, relying
Yeah.
on probabilistics, relying on saying I need to keep my funnel wide, or kharidne wala kharid lega.
Yeah.
I think we're changing that notion.
Yeah.
Having said all of this, I think we all know that the focus on the bottom of the funnel is a race to the bottom. You start optimizing for performance, you start looking at discounts, you start worrying about how do I get the guy to buy my next pack, and you forget about I need to build a brand. And that's what we are seeing. I mean, Dheeraj, you and me manage Oreo as a brand. Oreo is not too old in India. I can challenge you that, the kind of things that we've done in 10 years, I don't think there'll be any example. Any example. I mean, at the cost of sounding pompous, both of us are building this brand today. In 10 years, the scale that we've got, the number of transactions, the volumes we sell, the revenue we make, and the profit we're making. Right? So I think it's a little bit of, there's a coolness to the fact that, brands are being built in a few years. We have also been in the business of building brands. It's not just that we are living with 70, 80-year-old brands. And I can tell you that, if you follow the right principles and stay invested, fundamentally you need a really, really strong brand. You need a strong ecosystem that's building the brand on a day in, day out basis. That's what is going to create perpetuity.
And staying with this theme a bit more, Anil, a lot of organizations, say Unilever, etc., or say Marico, their way of learning new age partly is to say, okay, let's buy a Beardo, or let's invest through Unilever investments and Fireside, and that money flows, and they're either learning through acquisitions or somewhere also recognizing that perhaps the main core of the company cannot become as agile or as what we just spoke about, turn to data-led marketing and turn to MarTech so quickly, and therefore their response to this is not so much to try and change the core, but to fit something from outside. As a strong traditional marketing-led company, how would you process this?
Good point. I think there are two reasons. One is the two reasons why these large companies are buying these small brands. We are doing this at a global level as well, right? Genuinely, some of these D2C brands have unlocked market niches or business models which are non-traditional. Because we are scale marketers, scale businesses, we tend to look at niches and say, look, I will not be able to manage this in a profitable way. And hence, we've said we'll wait for that segment to become big. A subscription male grooming business, you can say, is going to be niche in the context of something like a Gillette, right? You'll never be able to compare that with a Gillette. But and hence, if I were to be Gillette, I would say, there's not much money to be made. I have the Gillette brand to grow. So I want to focus on that. That's the right thing to do. So what do I do then? Rather than, divert the focus of the entire set of organizations working on Gillette, I buy something. So I think it makes a lot of sense that, there is a different business model. Rather than reorient my business, I pick this up. So it's a different business model. It's a market niche. So that's one of the right reasons. And that's a good way of responding to the market, rather than waiting for that segment to become big, because then by that time you might be too late. It also helps keep your large brand on track in terms of what its core proposition is. It doesn't have to become schizo. I mean, it's very, very difficult for a mass brand to suddenly offer something which is very, very niche, right? And going by the same example, you have a few pilots that a Gillette has done in a few markets like Australia or some other parts of the world, where they have a very niche offering, but they'll never be able to integrate it back into Gillette. It'll still remain like a standalone business. So if it's anyway going to be a standalone business, why don't I buy it? Of course, I need to pay multiples, and that's the economics that they will play and figure out the CFO's job to figure out whether it works or not. But I'm sure it's working for them. So I think that's the part that's working well when large organizations are pivoting and picking up these, to ensure that they are not leaving any of these small niches without having to get down there themselves, because that's not what they'll be able to do well. I think that's the part that works. What doesn't work is the fact that I learn, once I bought this company, I'm going to learn from them. So that's the reason why this model works. I think the part that won't work, Dheeraj, is there are no shortcuts to embracing a new way of working on marketing. So I can't say that I can acquire a company, I can't acquire a skill set. And hence, I think in our mind, just building on to the DTC question, right? I think the penny drop moment for us is about 12, 18 months back to say, I can't have a digital marketing department which is different. Every marketer has to be a digital marketer. There's nothing called a digital marketer anymore. There's nothing called digital strategy, right? So I think the notion that every marketer today has to have a certain level of skill set to operate in a way which is which is what these D2C brands are doing. I mean, they're kind of
Yeah.
it's just redefining the science of it. And
Yeah.
you cannot say that I have a digital marketing team that's going to do this.
And have you, I mean, running such a strong set of repertoire brands, have you ever felt threatened by a D2C brand, or have you ever sat up and said, oh my God, I need to take notice, lest I get upset by them? Has that ever happened?
Definitely, definitely. I think
Yeah.
see there is definitely a lot of novelty around it, right? And if
Yeah.
I were to look at you and me as consumers, right?
Yeah.
Last Diwali when I got a gift box from a Bombay sweet shop, you liked it, I liked it. I'd be
Yeah.
lying to say that I didn't like it. So if I'm in the business of gifting and Diwali gifting and sweets, does it make
Yes.
me sit up and take notice? Of course it does, right? Now I
Yeah.
need to say, okay, how do I pivot? What do I need to pivot? What do I need to be conscious of? It's so good that this is happening on one hand, Dheeraj, because it is just opening up choice for the consumers. I mean,
Yes.
again, going back to the business that you and I know well, when Oreo came in 2010, just think pre-Oreo.
Yeah.
You and I grew up on 5 biscuit brands all our life.
Yeah.
There was a Marie, there
Yeah.
was a Bourbon, there was a
Yeah.
cookie. That's it. And look
Yeah.
at a biscuit shelf today. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what
Oh, absolutely.
competition does, right? So I think
Yeah.
what's really nice, both as a consumer and as a marketer, as a practitioner, it's really nice that this is happening in the first place. So I mean, the other interesting thing, we are 70% of the chocolate category, right?
Yeah.
The onus of growing the market is on us.
Yeah.
Now, it is also getting hugely difficult as the market develops. So I think, why should I be the only person who keeps trying out new things?
Yeah.
Sometimes I can follow. There is a
Yeah.
cost to trying out something new, right? So I think
Yes.
that's again something that we can leverage. I think the spirit of innovation just makes it easier for the market leader as well, to be very honest.
Yeah.
So I think we watch this space keenly, keeps us on our toes, learn, and we also can spot when somebody is trying to be over ambitious, somebody is trying to be over keen, somebody thinks that the investment that they're making is going to work out well. I mean, that's when you know that
Yeah.
we have the benefit of a few more years being in the industry.
No, absolutely. And then switching gears a bit, right? I mean, we spoke about digital, right? I think fundamentally from a agency perspective, I think there couldn't be a better time to be, because the palette of what's available to paint with is so amazing today, right? I mean, say about a decade back, you had words and images or maybe video to tell the story. Today, you could tell the story using technology. You could use AI. You could use machine learning. You can use so much. The whole palette is so widened, and that, for me personally, makes it such a great time to be in the business. And some of the work we've done in the past, for example, using technology to prevent accidents, right, with roads that
Fabulous.
honk, and that project right now, there's a 2.0 to that project, where it's now AI enabled, it's machine learning enabled. So we are now able to capture a guy sitting on top of a truck, right? And the system is so intelligent that honks intelligently. It's collecting data. We're working with Ministry of Road Transport to put many more of those. Now, that's something that advertising classically would have never done, right? So that's happening. Use of technology is happening. You yourself have, for Cadbury's, use AI, etc., to run a campaign, to the power of individual, and so on and so forth, right? Now, a couple of questions here, right? It's a juggernaut that I want to unpeel a bit. Now, from an agency perspective, when I was building digital capabilities, I was very clear when I was setting up digital that I don't want digital to be another vertical. I didn't want Leo Burnett traditional and Leo Burnett digital. I mean, that would be, and then we built the new capabilities within the teams, right? So all the teams
Yep.
have digital native, creative folks, strategy folks. We've hired account management digital native folks. We are constantly upgrading the current talent base, right? Running deep training programs with institutions and so on and so forth, right? So the whole ship has to become new age. You can't just have it borrowed, right? How are you looking at, one, a use of digital within the marketing process, b, use of digital and technology and data for brand in terms of
Yeah.
marketing? So I think two questions
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
there really, yeah.
Yeah. And before I, specifically answer this question, I mean, just kind of mirroring the reflection, I keep talking about this in multiple forums. I sort of repeat myself. No better time ever to be a marketer, right?
Absolutely
No better
agree.
time ever.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of myself as a brand manager and I joke that, those days you put out a campaign, then you can go on long holidays and wait for three
Yeah.
months for the results to come and say there's nothing else to do,
Yeah.
twiddle thumbs. Or when I started my life as a marketer, like many other young marketers, you start with a small brand, like you have no budget,
Absolutely.
right? And you say, okay, I'll do a consumer promotion, right? And today I speak to the Oreo brand manager saying that your Oreo Red Velvet you're launching and see what's there on your, what are the things you can do.
Yeah.
Right? And how exciting it is. I mean, you are
Yeah.
limited only by the power of your imagination.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have done a promo ad,
Yeah.
right? So I think no better time to be a marketer. So I think that's one. So I think a big job for me as a marketing leader is, of course, get people to keep, widening their horizon. And I think to that extent, the big role to be played there for me is to create that ecosystem. So the only way it can work is by creating a huge ecosystem. I think what's happened over the last 5 years is we now have more and more partners coming into the ecosystem so that we don't look at technology as technology, a specific capability,
Yeah.
but as a carrier of ideas. You never know where an idea could come from. Right? So
Yeah.
I think creating that ecosystem where we're constantly understanding what's happening around, I think then ensures that the marketer doesn't need to be the expert. He needs
Yeah.
to be the hub. You create a hub and spoke model, right? And you don't necessarily have to have the guy to know every single thing about every facet about digital marketing. So that's one. And then the second thing, as you're saying, is obviously invest in upgrading capability. So we've got a certification program. We
Yeah.
have a set of tools, that processes through which we upgrade the skills of every marketer who's coming in, from an entry level marketer to a mid marketer to a senior marketer. How do we certify? That's where a large organization, we can leverage some of our global resources. So there is a Mondelez University where people come in and learn
Yeah.
the stuff. I mean, we still don't have uh, marketing or business management schools yet pivoting hugely into the practical side of digital marketing, right, of digital businesses. It's still theoretical, even those who are offering courses. So we definitely feel that we need to do a lot of upgradation of skills within the organization. So that's the second part. And the third part is making data a way of life. So hence, creating the apparatus within the organization to get the data to come in.
Yeah.
And again, data is an interesting thing, right, Dheeraj? I mean, again, based on our experience, you always say, okay, there's an insights department,
Yeah.
there's a research partner, there is this guy who's somewhere sitting there who's going to generate reports for me. In this day and age, it's no longer possible, right? A, it's going to take time. B, you can't rely. I mean, you have to be. I mean, that's again something that we're learning from the startup culture. You have to act like an owner. I mean, you have to act
Yeah.
like owner of your
Yes.
business. You're not going
Yeah.
to say, somebody else is going to give me this data. So how do
Yeah.
we create that mindset shift, the cultural shift, to say that it's going to be me? So make the brand owner the owner of the business, owner of the brand.
Yeah.
Give him the tools, enable him, empower him, and then also put the responsibility and the pressure onto him, saying, now guys, the buck stop with you. So I think hence in many ways we've gone from the pendulum of building a lot of specialist services and specialist capabilities within the organization to say everything in service of the brand.
Yeah.
And that's helping us simplify, because the flip, going back to what's changed, what remains the same, knowledge of the brand is again incredibly important, right there.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get distracted as well.
Yeah.
So no better time to be a marketer, but also it's the best of times, worst of times kind of a situation where you can so easily get caught up with a toy. You get
Yeah.
caught up with something that I've done for the first time, you get super excited.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a Snapchat filter. Great, you have a
Wow.
Snapchat filter.
Yes.
Do you know a brand, dude? So I think that kind of a thing. So hence, the importance of everything in service of the brand, everything in service of the idea becomes also equally important.
Yeah.
That discipline to know your brand well and getting everybody to come together to work towards the brand. A federal kind of a structure, but yet with a very clear fountain, which is the core of
Yeah.
the brand.
Yeah. So very interesting. Very interesting. The other thing I want to talk to you, Anil, about is one of my favorite topics nowadays, which is collaboration, right? I feel that brands, like-minded brands, can hang around a lot more together, right? The whole idea of frenemies. I mean, there's so much, because classically marketing has always been a very lonely, single-track
Yeah.
function, right? I mean, you just
Yeah.
want to bother about your own brand and you want to own every asset, right? And I think that needs to change, and it's changing partly. Coming to what you and I did together for Oreo, right? The collab with Stranger Things for Red Velvet launch, right? And it just, I mean, who would have 10 years, 20 years ago imagined that a new program will get launched by a biscuit brand, so to say, right? And that collab ended so well for both the brands in that sense. I mean,
That's right.
Netflix is as happy as we are at Oreo. So how do you see the future of collab, the future of frenemies?
Very, very
Uh,
beautiful, beautiful reflection again, Dheeraj. 2 points to this, right? The first point is starting with the notion that I need to collaborate with the consumer itself, firstly.
yeah,
So it's important notion. We again, of so many years, the core brand principle, iconic brand assets. I want to build an iconic brand. And there's an unchangeability to an iconic brand to say
yeah,
this is unchangeable. I cannot change this. I cannot change the shape of this. I cannot change the color. I can't, da, 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 da. To today, a Gen
yeah,
Z and a Gen Alpha today says, I don't care, dude. How does it look?
yeah,
I don't care if my grandfather drank thumbs up or I had
yeah,
a dairy milk.
yeah,
So this notion that, and it's a very, very important notion because it's again kind of marketing 101, right? What do you learn from a
yeah,
Diageo? I mean, classical brands to say these
yeah,
things are classic, they'll never change.
yeah,
And yet you need to create collaboration, right? So the point that I'm iconic, this is something that is very, very true to me. This is how I represent myself. But yet I open my doors for the
yeah,
consumer to come
yeah,
in. And there's
yeah,
notion of co-creation.
yeah,
I think is a precursor to collaboration. Collaboration sometimes, I mean, what I see quite often is a lot of the sex appeal of it, the PR value of it. I'm unpeeling the onion to say even before the appeal, the PR appeal of it and the eyebrows that it'll raise is the precursor to say I need to open my doors and say, okay, what aspects of mine am I comfortable to open up?
yeah,
Which are those holy cows saying no more holy cows?
yeah, yeah.
Logo no longer important.
Correct. Yeah,
Color no longer important. What
yeah,
is important? Well, it's a very
yeah,
interesting notion.
yeah,
And there are some, you'll test and learn. I think this notion that I'm also happy to test and learn and say, oh, you know what, this is where I went too far, I accept defeat, is an important aspect. And once you open that up, I mean, it's a very, very scary notion, but it also comes through with the confidence. I mean, consumers are also wanting to engage with brands which are a little bit more self-effacing, little bit more humble and saying that, okay, I was like this in the past. I'm happy to change
yeah,
myself. And
yeah,
there's a change, the willingness to be flexible. I think so. That's one element of that's the core principle of collaboration. Why it is so
yeah,
important. And then, of course, the next step is to figure out, how could we take this notion forward. I think what is important also to never forget is in the service of the consumer. The moment you do it because you know the Netflix CMO or the agency that's working on both sides,
yeah,
again we
yeah,
get lazy, we'll end up doing things that is not necessarily the right things to do. So knowing our brands is also important, and
yeah,
knowing that the consumer will like it, and it
yeah,
will lead to something that becomes iconic for the brand. It becomes a chapter
yeah,
in the brand
yeah,
story. It's not just
yeah,
a cute or nice execution that I did and moved on. So I think
yeah,
that's what is going to
yeah.
come through very soon. And in the multitude of collab, Air Jordans are what we're looking at, right? That's what
Absolutely,
we want to get to.
absolutely,
So I think
absolutely.
hence there
Yeah,
needs to be a discipline, there needs to be a framework, there needs to be
yeah,
guardrails that we
yeah,
need to set. Maybe we are well placed to do a few small experiments, create our principles, and then
yeah,
take it up. And I think the point around frenemies is also very well taken to say that today again, a consumer is not drawing lines. So how do you ensure that you don't draw lines? We've changed as a company. Also, we've changed, Dheeraj. In the past, we used to call ourselves a chocolate company, a biscuit company, a candy company. We're now saying we are in the business of snacking.
yes,
I mean, then the notion that the
yeah,
consumer can easily pick
yeah,
up who are we to define what is what, and we sometimes get stuck in definitions and our old principles. I think consumer is leading the way, and we go along and
yeah,
follow the consumer. I think there has to be the humility that the consumer will decide. Also, that's going to be important.
yeah, yeah. No, that's very interesting. And switching gears a bit again, I want to probe a little bit on this again. Another penchant of mine, which I call regional, right? And that's not new, right? I mean, we've always said that
Yeah,
there are many Indias in India, but we've never executed that. I mean, I remember till very early we used to think national and then execute local,
yeah,
right? So we've done read ups and so on and so forth. But now, for example, I just set up an offering called Leo Burnett Regional on the back of a 20,000 sample size research survey, which helps us delineate how is say food consumption different across 6 markets. What are the attitudes different, money, so on and so forth. Right. So we are investing in knowledge, strategy, creation, which is local. So we have people from local markets creating, right? We have directors from local nuances building that. And there are enough examples. For example, the whole Spotify piece we recreated in local. So it's local insight, local up. all of that. And more of that is beginning to happen, right? There's also, if you look at the technology space, there is proliferation of, say, Moj and Share Chat, etc., who come bottom up rather than top down. They're not Facebook down. They're not Instagram down. I mean, and I was talking to some of the people who run those platforms. They said that we took away English as an option in the choice language, because people were selecting English but not interacting. And the moment you gave them the local language choice, the interaction, the participation went through the roof. So there's obviously a huge amount of confidence. See, earlier it was I will adapt to your language. Today it's about I am confident in my native language, right? I mean, and I
Yeah.
have the audacity to be in that skin, right? Everything else is actually alien,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And how do you feel that should change the way marketers think, and how should that change the shape of marketing in execution and living it?
I understand what it is. I think it's very, very fascinating, Dheeraj. And there are conflicting trends, there are nuances, and it's extremely difficult for national marketers like ours. So I think I will say that right up front. It's very easy if you're a regional brand. What's happening for a regional brand? One is a regional brand thought of itself as self-limiting. And
Yeah,
today, it doesn't need to be self-limiting. Thought of
yeah,
itself as a little bit more conservative and traditional. It doesn't need to think about it that way. If you think about a
yeah,
Medimix or think about a Borolen
yeah.
today, I mean,
Or even RRR
or even
as an
RRR.
idea.
And coming to exactly the second one. So one is within the region that I represent, I change myself from being conservative to aspirational within the region. And then the second is I can aspire for markets outside my core because I no longer have to be self-limiting, like an RRR. To say that no longer is the Telugu or a Kannada or a Tamil or a Malayalam cinema is limited to its region, it's just
Yeah,
exploded. All you need is subtitle, or all you need is a context connector. You need the bridge. The moment a
yeah,
bridge comes in, so I think it's a huge opportunity for regional brands.
yeah,
I think it is a more. I mean, I'd love to think of having a few regional brands then, and I can see how can I build a footprint for them to go national. For a national brand, I think it's
yeah,
an interesting dynamic between saying that finally my relationship with the consumer, it's no longer, I mean, not even about India. I mean, our fundamental thing is the relationship between Oreo and a consumer is a global one. I mean, across the globe, it's just one. It is one
yeah,
relationship, and that relationship is core to what the brand stands for. So I really don't
yeah.
want to get too stuck up in nuances. It just distracts. You create 10 different pieces of stories when one was good enough, because all you need is the one story.
Yeah,
I think the point is the story doesn't need to be written in Mumbai, it doesn't need to be written in Hindi. I think that's an interesting notion.
yeah,
To your point, hence, if there is a very nice insight that comes from a south or from a east, we should be comfortable enough to take it up and take it to the rest of the country, or even becomes the source of the
yeah,
idea, and it travels across the
yeah,
country. Like for example, what we did
yeah.
with Oreo, with your young digital team and the YouTube team
Yes,
in Tamil Nadu for Pongal. Right?
yes,
It's
yeah,
become a case study
yeah,
for YouTube as
yeah,
content
yeah,
creators. But what we created there, we think now let's take it to West and Maharashtra because we see an
yeah,
opportunity of expanding penetration in Maharashtra. It
yeah,
worked for Pongal, it'll work for Ganpati. So I think now,
yeah,
how do we then create these very nice springboards for insights? I think again, what's making my hands rub is the fact that just see the volume of insight that we can
yeah,
generate.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
see the power of stories like Minnal Murali.
yeah,
Can you see Minnal Murali?
yeah,
What a beautiful superhero story set in a village
yeah,
in Kerala. Can you see the power of that
yeah,
and how it can
absolutely.
travel across the
Yeah,
world?
yeah,
So I think
yeah,
that's possibly what happened. I think it's exploding the
yeah,
canvas from which we can
yeah,
source insights, stories, references. I think we no longer have to rely on this four or five faces and four or five
yeah,
sources. I mean, that's the fascinating bit. I think how do we build a little bit of method in the madness to say when is it important?
yes, yeah,
When do we need to do
yeah,
it? When is it just a bit too fashionable, right? So I think that's what we
yeah,
need to be kind of conscious of. I just love the work you've done on Spotify. I mean, the ability to
yeah,
connect using
yeah,
language as a medium rather
yeah,
than I think the world of dubs are gone, right? I mean, I think very soon we're going to say that.
yeah,
We will feel that we've left a stone unturned by dubbing.
yes,
no? And that's
Yeah.
what your Spotify
Yeah.
work is showing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just see the
Yeah.
beauty
Yeah.
of being able to connect. Just the power of
Yes.
connection that you're able
Yeah.
to establish.
Yeah.
And I think you're in the audio medium, and I think the power of audio here possibly is even more will
Yeah.
come alive. I mean, look at
Yeah.
R. Ashwin,
Yeah.
and R. Ashwin saying that, look,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do a vlog in or a blog in
Yeah.
English.
Yeah.
Logging in, seeing it in subtitles, and he's speaking in Tamil, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that, I
Yeah.
mean, language is such
Yeah.
a beautiful, and
Yeah.
I think that's the other bit that's going to explode in my view, the power of these languages, the beauty of
Yeah.
these. I
Yeah.
mean, a Bangla and a Punjabi and a Marathi and
Yeah.
I mean, just imagine the beauty.
Also with the tech platforms, right? Tech platforms, voice search being in local language, being enabled. There's a huge project running there. So there's so much of richness, and I think what you rightly underline, Anil, is the fact that these ideas can emanate from those corners, but they're so rich that they can travel.
That's right.
Right, so suddenly we have so much more interesting pop culture at hand
That's
to
right.
tap
You're right.
than
And
just the national pop culture.
absolutely. And I don't know you well enough, but I know for sure that you're not born and brought up in Bombay. So you've been exposed to multiple
Yeah, yeah.
cultures.
Yes, of course.
I am a Tamilian by birth, but I grew up in
Yeah,
Kolkata, studied in Chennai, worked in
yeah,
Kerala, then came into
yeah,
Bombay.
yeah,
We've
yeah,
seen this happen, right? We've
yeah,
seen ourselves the value, and then when I see people who don't know, and I talk to them, and I now see the kids of today, what they can see and what they can
yeah,
experience. It just feels so fascinating. I mean, I think
yeah,
we're going to get better as a
yeah.
society, as a nation at
No,
a broader level.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. One more construct, Anil, that I wanted to discuss with you: the idea of efficacy and effectiveness. Right? I mean, how's that changing? Because, I mean, there are lots of metrics now, which some may call vanity metrics. That, oh, my piece went viral, or I had so many views, and paid views versus unpaid views, right? And then being able to correlate back to the uplift and so on and so forth. I mean, it was so much more easier back in the day when you looked at
So
primaries and
true.
you looked at secondaries, and you knew. How's the notion of what's effective and what's not effective changing? And
Yeah,
as
I
a
think.
marketer, how are you
Yeah,
looking at that?
I think, as I said to me, I think that's why for me, market mix modeling becomes my Bible. So I go straight to
Yeah,
the sale. I can do it only once a year, but now we have been doing
yeah,
it for a few years. So then it makes it much simpler to say, I don't care where I
yeah,
spend the money, it'll move my business.
yeah,
And then I will just go through
yeah,
the journey and see. So to me, that becomes a very, very simple tool. All the
yeah,
other tools are obviously kind of what you would call lead metrics. So it
yeah,
is kind of input metrics to see that, kind of a check to say, am I doing something which is fundamentally wrong, or is it not cutting through the
yeah,
rhythm, etc. There are more validation input lead metrics, but eventually I would say business becomes this easier. That's the way I look at it. It keeps it very simple for me from sitting where I am. For a brand manager, I would definitely feel sad for them. It's not easy anymore. It's not easy anymore,
yeah,
and I don't envy them, and I empathize as well to say that in the absence of something very very clear, I have to use whatever is available to get a little bit of a reference point. My only piece of advice would be to
yeah,
not to get obsessed with it, and try to
yeah,
keep your business objectives in mind, your marketing objectives in mind. You don't get obsessed with one metric. Look at a
yeah,
smorgasbord and be a little bit more broader and a little bit more longer term. I mean, easier things to say now that I
yeah,
am where I am, but
yeah.
I can understand what a brand manager is going through today.
I want to put you in a bit of a spot, Anil. I want you to choose amongst all the brands or projects that you've done, which are the ones which are closest to your heart.
Oh my God! I mean,
Choose amongst your children.
oh my God! It's always very difficult. I think I'll choose two. Dheeraj. One, I mean, as a marketer, we always get caught up in terms of the creative work that we put out.
Yeah,
And quite often strategy is not seen as
yeah,
something which is. And as a marketer, been in the business, I love the perspective around building categories and changing the category momentum. To me, that
yes,
excites me a lot as a
yeah,
marketer. I mean, to me, that's what I look at
yeah,
from others and what I learn from others as well. So I really love what we've
yeah,
achieved with Oreo in our country. We're very proud of it. I was
yeah,
there when
yeah,
working for 9 months. It came through as an acquisition. We were the acquired company.
yeah,
So I was in Cadbury. We got acquired by Kraft Food. We said within 9 months we need to make the acquisition work. Launch in 9 months. And don't know B of biscuits, right? and you're up against the giant. Great. It's a black colored cookie. Black as a food color is not accepted. It's bitter
Yeah.
tasting. Product test
Yes.
fails. And what do you do? So I think
Yeah.
classic case study, but very
Yeah.
happy to look back with a degree of pride, not for the fact that where we've gotten to and how Oreo is the most loved cookie in the country. But as I was telling you earlier in
Yeah.
this conversation, there's a clear pre and post moment. I mean, there's ITC and what they've
Yes.
done for biscuits, and then Oreo. Today,
Yeah.
possibly there are 100 brands, and we grew with 10. That's the power of
Yeah.
competition as well, and single-handedly led the premiumization of the category. And we keep seeing that number. It's growing 3x, 5x of the base category. And you talk about premiumization, a business objective. The flip is premiumization as a
Yeah.
consumer to say getting offer better and better
Yeah.
products. So that's the kind of the strategic part I'm really really proud of. And from a creative standpoint, and creative, and from a very nostalgia, emotional standpoint, there's this brand called Five Star. It's a very cute brand. It's very
Yes.
uh,
Yeah.
it's a love it hate it kind of brand. People who dislike it will say I hate the product, and there is this
Yeah.
niceness to it. And over the last about 10 odd years, we've just created some really really good advertising
Yeah.
on it,
Yeah.
which has made it stand out, which has given its tonality and
Yes.
personality with Ramesh and Suresh for a
Yeah.
period of time. And now what we're doing with
Yeah.
Do Nothing, we
Very
just feel
iconic
that
work. Yes.
uh,
Yes. Yeah.
we've set it up for success, and it's a brand that can really go
Yeah.
places. Those are the two brands that
Yeah.
come to mind.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Very, very inspiring, Anil. And just segueing very easily from there, I mean, to the young marketers who are listening to you right now, what would you say? I mean, what have you learned from your failures? What would you ask them to do, not to do?
As I said, the opening line is that never ever a better time to be a marketer. So welcome is what I would say. Come in
Yeah.
with curious eyes, keep learning. Don't fear to fail. I've failed fast. I've failed. I mean, I failed often. I failed early. I failed a lot, and I live to tell the tale. So I think there's lots to learn if you have a learning orientation. Get into an ecosystem where you can learn within the organization, through your partners, build an ecosystem. Don't think that you're the center of the universe. It's a family. Village grows a child. Village grows a brand. So it takes a village to create a brand. So learn to work with others, be collaborative, listen, travel, immerse yourself. So I think at a headline level, advice would be curious, keep a learning
Yeah.
orientation, and yeah, and I think many cliches. It is not an art; it's an art and a science. You're never born a marketer. You don't necessarily have to be the curious, creative side types only to succeed. You don't need to be an extrovert. You don't need to be a great speaker. You know, to back yourself, and it's all simple. So it's not rocket science at all. And as much as we talk data and digital and AI and ML, the fundamental principles of brand building will still remain very, very simple. So, if you want to
Yeah.
back yourself there, if you think you like it because it's messy,
Yeah.
there are no easy answers. It's not that I have a simple target and I can
Yeah.
achieve it. Success is difficult to measure, but if you're happy with the ambiguity, if you love to shape things, then
Yeah.
welcome as a marketer.
Thank you so much, Anil. Such a fantastic conversation, right? I think we went to the depths of many dilemmas, many questions which are being tossed around in marketing and business today. So great to have you on this
Thank you for
show.
the
And
opportunity. As I was saying, I mean, it's a privilege. I admired you as a practitioner, as a veteran in the industry. Admired all the things that you've done, and I admire your podcast as well. So thank you for the opportunity, Dheeraj.
yeah, and at this stage we flip the mic, Anil. So you get to ask me questions, and I will try and do the best of what I can.
Oh no, it's a great opportunity. So let me do some quick fires. Your favorite chocolate?
My favorite chocolate will be Cadbury's Dairy Milk. Yeah, the classic.
Three things that come to your mind when you think of the word chocolate.
Messy, indulgence, joy.
Excellent. Other than Willy Wonka, if you can think of one fictional character when you think of any of our brand.
Fictional caravan of your brands. Tintin and Oreo.
Very nice. Very interesting. Your favorite podcast?
My favorite podcast, I listen a lot to the Knowledge Project. So I'm interested in how the mental model of the world, right? How things work, and I think that quite well.
The last book you've read,
The last book I read is actually Rethink by Adam Grant.
the last song you've heard,
The last song I've heard, Pushpa.
the brand that you've loved the most working on,
Right now it has to be Spotify.
and one piece of work that you wish you had done.
Lots of pieces of work. I mean, I think what you've done on Cadbury's, for example, is top of my mind. I think great brand, great work, uses data, goes to the power of one. Great use of celebrity in that sense. Yeah, I mean, a lot of heart for that work. Yeah.
Super, super. That's it from my end, Dheeraj. Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you so much, Anil. Amazing. Yeah. And Anil, just before I let you go, for all the people who are listening to the podcast, if they want to get in touch with you, for more comments, any thoughts they have, what's the best way to reach out to you?
The best way to reach out to me would be on WhatsApp, on my phone.
Yeah, but you would give your number out. So how is
Or on email.
how is do all the
Or email, yeah. So
yeah,
email, or I'm on Twitter. So yeah, I mean, I'd love for people to
yeah.
email. I mean, I'm sure through the podcast notes you can share our email addresses, and happy
Yeah,
to pick up.
superb. And if you can give out your
Of
Twitter
course,
handle.
I'll do that. Oh, you want me to do that right now? It's at the rate
Yeah,
chai underscore
yeah,
vis.
you could do it.
So it's chai underscore vis.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anil. Thanks for spending this time, and it's a great conversation.
Thanks, Dheeraj.